John Harris, a U.S. Marine, is lying in the wreckage of a battlefield, bleeding out, with no hope of survival. Alone and helpless, he can barely move. Suddenly, Shadow, his loyal German shepherd, appears from the smoke and chaos, dragging him to safety. As the storm rages on, John slips in and out of consciousness. The doctors say there's nothing more they can do, but Shadow refuses to leave his side. In a moment of silence, John whispers a prayer. Please, just one more chance. Then, just when all seems lost, a small movement from John sends shockwaves through the room. He's alive. But how? Watch what happens next, and prepare to believe in miracles. He wasn't supposed to survive. The words echoed in the cold, empty silence of the hospital room. John Harris, a battle-worn Marine, lay unconscious, his body battered and broken. The doctors had given up on him. His heart was slowing, his breath shallow. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of rain and the faintest trace of gunpowder. But despite the odds, there was one soul who refused to give up on him. Shadow, a German shepherd, had been his companion through countless missions, each one more dangerous than the last. She had saved him before, and now she would do it again. Shadow sat by the door, her amber eyes fixed on John, her body tense, as if waiting for something. She had never left his side, not even once. Through the long hours of John's unconsciousness, Shadow never moved, never gave up. She had sensed his pain, his fear, his struggle to hold on to life. And she knew, if anyone could bring him back, it was her. Shadow had always been more than just a dog. She was his guardian, his partner, his family. When the blast had hit, it was Shadow who dragged him to safety, pulling him through the wreckage when every other soldier had fallen. Now, as John lay motionless, Shadow's loyalty and love were all that remained. The machines beeped steadily, a grim reminder of the life that once pulsed through John's veins. But Shadow wouldn't let it end like this. With a soft whine, she stood up and approached the bedside, her eyes never leaving his face. She knew what she had to do. With a careful movement, she nudged her nose against his hand, then placed her head gently on his chest. She waited, and then, after what felt like an eternity, something happened. John's fingers twitched. Shadow's ears perked up, her eyes wide with anticipation. The sound of a faint breath filled the room, the tiniest sign of life returning to the body that had been so close to death. Shadow's tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster as John's chest rose with each breath. She licked his hand, her way of urging him to wake up. And then, just like that, his eyes fluttered open. The room was blurry at first, but then it came into focus. He saw Shadow, her eyes filled with love and determination. John tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice barely a whisper. "You saved me," he breathed. Shadow nuzzled him gently, as if saying, "Of course, I did." For the first time in days, a smile tugged at the corner of John's lips. He wasn't alone. Shadow had never left him, and now they were both alive. Together. But how much longer could they stay this way? Only time would tell. As the days passed, John slowly began to regain his strength. The hospital room, once filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic, now felt warmer, filled with the presence of Shadow, who had not left his side since that fateful moment. John could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing hour. She had been there when no one else was, her unwavering loyalty and love pulling him back from the brink of death. He had always known she was special, but now, he understood just how much she meant to him. Shadow was more than just a dog. She was his lifeline, his reason for fighting to stay alive. Every day, as John's body healed, he found himself growing more attached to her, finding comfort in her presence. Her eyes, full of warmth and understanding, seemed to speak to him in ways words never could. She would nudge him gently, as if telling him everything would be okay, even when the world seemed dark and uncertain. John had seen the worst of humanity, but Shadow had shown him the best. She was the embodiment of loyalty, and with every small step he took toward recovery, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. For her, it was clear now, she was his protector, his angel in disguise. The world outside was still uncertain, filled with chaos and unpredictability, but in this moment, with Shadow by his side, John felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The pain in his body still lingered, but it was nothing compared to the warmth he felt in his heart. Shadow had given him more than just physical survival. She had given him hope. Hope that, no matter how broken the world might seem, there could still be love and light. One afternoon, as John sat up in his bed, Shadow lay beside him, her head resting on his lap. He realized just how much he had taken her presence for granted. They had been through so much together, and she had never once faltered. She was the one constant in his life, the one who had been there through the darkest moments. And now, she was the reason he was still here. He stroked her fur gently, the soft rhythm of his hand against her coat soothing both of them. The sound of the machines around him seemed to fade away as he lost himself in the simple joy of having her close. Shadow looked up at him, her amber eyes filled with trust and affection, and for the first time since he'd woken up, John felt a deep sense of peace. He wasn't just alive, he was truly living again, and it was all because of her. As the days went on, John began to dream of what life would be like when he was fully recovered. He thought of taking Shadow on long walks, maybe even back to the place where they had first met. He imagined a life where they could be together, just the two of them, away from the noise and chaos of the world. But for now, he was content. With Shadow by his side, he knew he had everything he needed to face whatever came next. As John continued his recovery, life outside the hospital seemed like a distant memory. The quiet rhythm of the medical machines and the soft hum of Shadow's presence were all that filled his days. But each day, his strength grew, and with it, the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could return to the life he once knew. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a golden glow over the room, John sat up in his bed, a little stronger than before. Shadow, ever watchful, lay beside him, her head resting on the edge of the mattress. The bond between them was undeniable. It wasn't just the loyalty of a dog to its owner. It was the profound connection of two beings who had saved each other. John smiled as he reached down to pet her, feeling the warmth of her fur under his hand. Shadow's eyes met his, and for a moment, it was as if time stood still. They understood each other without words. Shadow had been his protector, his companion, and now, she was the reason he was still alive. The doctors were amazed at his progress. They had prepared John for a long, difficult recovery, but he was defying their expectations. Slowly, he started walking with assistance, his legs still weak, but gaining strength with each step. Shadow walked beside him, her presence a constant reminder of the incredible journey they had been on together. The world outside the hospital was still unfamiliar to him, but Shadow made it feel safe. One afternoon, as John took his first steps outside, the sun felt different on his skin. It wasn't just the warmth of the day, but the warmth of a new beginning. Shadow trotted ahead, her tail wagging, as if urging him to keep going. They walked together, the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet the only sound. John had missed this, the simple act of walking, of being outside, of feeling alive. And with Shadow by his side, it felt like everything was possible again. Days turned into weeks, and John's strength continued to improve. He started working with a physical therapist, pushing himself harder each day, determined to get back to the life he had before. But in the back of his mind, there was always the knowledge that it was Shadow who had brought him this far. Without her, he wouldn't have made it. As the weeks passed, John began to think about the future. He dreamed of returning to the life he once knew, perhaps taking Shadow on long hikes, exploring the mountains they had always talked about. But more than that, he dreamed of a life where he could give back to the world, just as Shadow had given him a second chance at life. It was clear that his recovery wasn't just about physical healing. It was about healing the soul. Shadow had taught him something that no doctor or therapist ever could: the true meaning of loyalty, love, and hope. He didn't know what the future held, but with Shadow by his side, he felt ready to face anything that came his way. As the months went by, John's life slowly began to fall back into a routine, though it was a routine he had never imagined for himself. He was no longer just a Marine recovering from injuries. He was someone whose entire perspective on life had shifted. Shadow had given him that new beginning, the hope he needed to push forward when everything seemed impossible. Every morning, John would wake up to find Shadow already by his side, her eyes soft and watchful as if ensuring he was safe. It was a quiet morning ritual, the two of them, human and dog, starting the day together in silence, understanding each other in ways words could never express. On one of their morning walks, John found himself gazing out at the horizon, the sun casting long shadows across the ground. He had always dreamed of a life filled with adventure, but now, his idea of adventure had changed. It wasn't about the missions or the battles anymore. It was about small moments, like watching the sunrise with Shadow, sharing a quiet walk in the park, or feeling the wind on his face as they sat together, enjoying the simple things. He wasn't ready to go back to the world he had known before, but he was ready to build a new life, a life with Shadow by his side. Over time, John began to volunteer at local organizations that helped veterans and their families. He shared his story, not for attention, but to inspire others who were struggling. It wasn't easy for him to talk about the past, but Shadow was always there, her presence grounding him when the memories became overwhelming. She had saved him once, and now, she was helping him heal in ways he never thought possible. Every day felt like a gift. As he stood in front of a group of veterans, speaking about his journey, John realized that Shadow had not only saved his life physically but emotionally as well. She had shown him what it meant to truly live, to embrace the present, and to never give up, no matter how difficult the journey might seem. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, John sat on the porch of his new home, Shadow resting at his feet. The air was cool, and the quiet of the evening surrounded them both. He thought about the long road ahead, the challenges that would come, but he also knew something deep in his heart. With Shadow by his side, there was nothing he couldn't face. The future was uncertain, but it was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with hope and the promise of a new chapter in his life, one where he could move forward, not alone, but with the dog who had given him everything. Shadow had given him a second chance at life, and now, it was up to him to make the most of it. As he looked down at Shadow, her eyes full of quiet understanding, he whispered, "Thank you." Shadow's tail wagged softly, as if she understood the depth of his gratitude. She had been his savior, his friend, his companion, and now, she was his future. As the seasons changed, so did John's life. He had found his footing, his strength, and a new sense of purpose. Shadow remained by his side every step of the way, always vigilant, always loving. John had taken up a new routine, one that didn't revolve around military schedules or long, hard missions. Instead, it was filled with quiet moments, walks in the park, and sitting together as the sun set each evening. There was a peace in these moments, a peace that John had never fully known until now. He had come to realize that while his past was filled with chaos and challenges, it was this new life that mattered. Shadow had taught him that the little things, the simple moments of connection and love, were what truly made life worth living. The once lonely Marine was now surrounded by a family of his own making. It wasn't much, but it was everything. One afternoon, as John sat in his backyard, gazing at the trees swaying in the breeze, he felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him. Shadow was lying nearby, her body stretched out lazily on the grass, her ears twitching every so often as if listening for something. He had been through so much, but in this moment, it felt as if the world was at peace. He thought back to the days when he was struggling in the hospital, to the fear and uncertainty that clouded his mind. It seemed so far away now, like another life entirely. But Shadow, his loyal companion, had been there the whole time. She had never given up on him, and now, neither did he. John knew that the future was still full of unknowns. There would be challenges ahead, just as there were behind him. But he also knew that as long as he had Shadow by his side, he could face whatever came his way. Together, they had overcome so much, and together, they would continue to face whatever life had in store. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, John found himself not just healing, but thriving. He began to volunteer more, using his experience to help others who had been through similar struggles. He shared his story, not for the recognition, but because he knew it could inspire those who were still lost, still searching for hope. He had found his way back from the edge, and he wanted others to know that they could, too. And through it all, Shadow was with him, her presence a reminder of the power of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. As he continued his journey, John realized that his life, once defined by service and sacrifice, was now defined by something even more powerful, his bond with Shadow. She had given him more than just a second chance at life. She had given him a reason to live it fully. With Shadow by his side, John knew he was ready for whatever the future held. As John settled into his new life, he began to notice the little things that made him smile, the things he had taken for granted before. The sound of Shadow's paws clicking on the hardwood floors, the soft warmth of her fur against his hand, the way she looked at him with unwavering loyalty and love. These were the moments that made life feel whole again. He had learned to cherish them. One afternoon, as they walked together through the park, John marveled at how far he had come. Just a year ago, he had been fighting to survive, unsure of what the future would hold. Now he was living it, enjoying every moment, every step. Shadow trotted ahead, her tail wagging, as if showing him the path to a brighter future. John smiled to himself. She had always been his guide, even when he hadn't known it. As they continued their walk, John found himself thinking about the people who had helped him along the way. The doctors, the physical therapists, his friends, they had all played a part in his recovery, but none of it would have been possible without Shadow. She had been there from the very beginning, never leaving his side. When he had felt hopeless, she had given him something to live for. When the pain seemed unbearable, she had been his comfort. Shadow was more than just a dog. She was his strength, his courage, and his reason for pushing forward. She had taught him what it meant to be resilient, to keep fighting even when the odds were against him. As John sat on a bench, watching Shadow chase after a stick, he realized how much he had grown. He wasn't just physically stronger, he was stronger in spirit. He had learned to live with purpose, to find meaning in the everyday moments, and to embrace the challenges life threw his way. Shadow had shown him the way, and now he was walking it with confidence. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, John felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. He had a second chance at life, and he wasn't going to waste it. He looked down at Shadow, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. With Shadow by his side, John was ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into months, John found himself growing stronger not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. The pain of his past was still there, lingering in the corners of his mind, but it no longer controlled him. Shadow had given him the tools to heal, to find peace within himself. With her by his side, he had learned that healing wasn't just about mending broken bones. It was about mending the heart and soul. He had learned to embrace the moments of stillness, the quiet that filled the space between him and Shadow. Every morning, when they went for their walk, the simple act of being together brought him a sense of calm he had never known before. It wasn't just the physical exercise that helped him recover. It was the emotional support that Shadow gave him, her presence a constant reassurance that he wasn't alone. One day, as John sat on the porch, watching Shadow run around the yard with boundless energy, he realized just how much she had become a part of his life. She was no longer just a dog. She was family. She had been through the toughest of times with him, and now she was the source of his strength. Looking at her, John knew that he had found something special, something he couldn't put into words. It wasn't just a bond between a man and a dog. It was a bond between two souls who had saved each other. As he looked out at the sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, John felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. With Shadow by his side, he knew that there was nothing he couldn't face. The future, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now felt full of possibility. John had learned to let go of the past, to embrace the present, and to look forward to the future with hope. And it was all because of Shadow. She had shown him that love, loyalty, and the bond between a man and his dog were the most powerful forces in the world. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but he knew that as long as he had Shadow, he could face anything that came his way. They had already been through so much together, and no matter what the world threw at them, they would always have each other. As the months passed, John's life continued to evolve in ways he never expected. Shadow, his loyal German shepherd, was always there, a constant companion who seemed to understand his every need. They had been through so much together. From the darkest days in the hospital to the quiet, healing moments they shared now. The bond between them had grown deeper than either could have imagined. John had always been a man of action, a Marine trained to face adversity head-on. But Shadow had taught him something new, the importance of slowing down, of appreciating the small, quiet moments. One afternoon, John found himself sitting on the porch, staring out at the horizon as the sun dipped low in the sky. The light cast a golden glow over everything, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. Shadow lay beside him, her head resting on his lap as she dozed peacefully. John absent-mindedly stroked her fur, feeling a sense of gratitude that he had never fully understood until now. It wasn't just that she had saved his life. It was that she had been with him every step of the way, never wavering, never asking for anything in return. It was her love, her loyalty, that had carried him through the hardest of times. Without her, he wasn't sure he would have made it. John had come to realize that he was no longer the man he once was. The physical scars of his past would always be there, but they no longer defined him. Shadow had helped him heal in ways he couldn't even explain. She had given him back a sense of purpose, of belonging. As he watched her sleep, John thought about the future. He had big plans, dreams of traveling, of exploring the world he had once fought to protect. But he knew that, no matter where life took him, Shadow would always be by his side. She was his family now, his constant, and together, they could face anything. Over the next few months, John became more involved in the community. He began working with other veterans, sharing his story, offering support to those who were struggling in ways he once had. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of his past threatened to pull him under. But Shadow was always there, a steady presence that reminded him he wasn't alone. John had learned the value of connection, of reaching out to others, and he knew that by sharing his experiences, he could help others find their way back from the darkness. One evening, as John sat with a fellow veteran at the local diner, talking about life after service, he realized just how far he had come. He had once been a man who felt lost, overwhelmed by the weight of his own pain. Now, he was helping others navigate the same struggles, offering them the hope that he had once needed. It was a reminder of how far he and Shadow had come together, from survival to healing, from isolation to connection. As the night wore on, John felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He had found his place in the world again, and it was all thanks to the dog who had never given up on him. Shadow had given him the strength to rebuild his life, and now, they were both moving forward together, side by side, ready for whatever came next. As time passed, John and Shadow continued to live their lives in a peaceful, steady rhythm. John had found a new sense of purpose, one that didn't require him to be in the middle of a battlefield or to face physical danger. Instead, he was learning what it meant to live fully, to appreciate the simple moments with Shadow by his side. He no longer saw the world through the eyes of a Marine, but as a man who had been given a second chance at life. It was a quiet life, but it was rich with meaning. John spent his days volunteering with veterans, helping them adjust to civilian life, just as he had done. The work was fulfilling, and he found that by sharing his story, he could offer others hope. It was something he had never imagined for himself, a life where he could give back, where he could help others find their way out of the darkness, just as he had. Shadow was always with him, either by his side or nearby, her presence grounding him. She had always been more than just a dog. She was his anchor, his reminder that no matter how tough life got, there was always love and loyalty to hold on to. One evening, as John and Shadow walked through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, he noticed something that made him pause. A young woman sitting on a bench near the park looked up as they passed by, her eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and sorrow. John gave her a nod, and Shadow stopped to sit by her, as if sensing the sadness in her heart. The woman smiled, though it was a small, sad smile. "I haven't seen a dog like this in a long time," she said softly. "She's a German Shepherd, isn't she?" John nodded. "Yes, she is. Her name's Shadow." The woman reached out to pet Shadow, who nuzzled her hand with gentle affection. "I used to have a dog like her," the woman said, her voice trembling. "He was my best friend, but he passed away a few years ago. I still miss him every day." John's heart ached for the woman, remembering his own loss. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said gently. "But I can tell you that Shadow here, she's one of those dogs who never forgets. She'll stay with you, even when you think you're alone." The woman's eyes welled up with tears, but she smiled again, this time a little brighter. "Thank you. I needed to hear that. John nodded, and the three of them sat in silence for a while, the quiet comfort of the moment settling between them. Shadow lay at their feet, her head resting on John's lap. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across the park, John realized that this was exactly what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't fame or fortune or recognition that brought him peace. It was the small, everyday moments, the connection between people, the bond between man and dog, and the understanding that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. With Shadow beside him, John felt ready for whatever came next. Together, they had faced the worst, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were a team, and that was all that mattered. As the years passed, John and Shadow's bond only grew stronger. John had come to realize that his life had become richer in ways he never thought possible. He had learned to embrace the small joys, the everyday moments that once seemed insignificant. He no longer rushed through life, always looking ahead to the next goal, the next mission. Now, he savored the present, enjoying the simplicity of sitting on the porch with Shadow by his side, watching the world go by. There was a peace in his heart that had once been absent, a calmness that had come from the love and loyalty of his German shepherd. One afternoon, as John and Shadow walked through their neighborhood, he noticed a small family struggling to carry a large, bulky box up the stairs to their house. Without thinking, John walked over to offer a hand. The family smiled gratefully, and the father, a man in his late 30s, nodded in thanks. "We could use all the help we can get," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. John smiled back, bending to help with the box. Shadow sat patiently by his side, watching as he lifted the box, her ears alert, her gaze unwavering. As they carried the box up the stairs, the man's wife came out to greet them. She was holding a young child in her arms, a baby girl with bright blue eyes. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice soft and warm. "We're just getting settled in. It's been a long day." John nodded, setting the box down carefully. "No problem at all. Glad to help." The little girl reached out her tiny hand to Shadow, giggling as the dog gently nuzzled her fingers. John chuckled, watching the scene unfold. Shadow had always had a way with children, and it warmed his heart to see the joy she brought to others. As they finished unloading the last of the boxes, the man turned to John with a grateful smile. "You know," he said, "it's rare to find people who still care enough to help out like this. You don't see that much anymore." John shrugged, feeling a bit humbled. "I've learned a lot from my dog," he said, glancing down at Shadow, who was wagging her tail. "She's the reason I've been able to get through everything. It's the little things, the moments that matter most." The man nodded, his eyes softening. "You've got a good friend there. It's clear she's brought you a lot of peace." John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Shadow had given him more than he could ever put into words. She had given him a second chance at life, a new perspective, and a sense of purpose he had never known before. The afternoon light began to fade as they finished helping the family. As John walked back home with Shadow at his side, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the life he now had. The future no longer seemed uncertain or daunting. With Shadow by his side, he felt ready for anything. They had been through so much together, and they had come out the other side stronger, more connected, and more alive than ever before. Whatever challenges life had in store, John knew one thing for sure. With Shadow beside him, he was never alone. Years passed, and life for John and Shadow continued to unfold in ways they both could never have imagined. The days were no longer marked by the rush of military schedules or the uncertainty of what came next. Now, they were filled with peace, small joys, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. John had found his rhythm, the kind of steady, grounded life he had longed for after the chaos of his past. Every morning, Shadow was by his side, her presence a constant reminder that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. One Sunday morning, John decided to take a trip to the lake, a place he used to visit before everything changed. It had been years since he last came here, but he had always found peace in the quiet waters, the stillness of nature that helped him reflect. Shadow was excited as ever, her tail wagging furiously as they walked along the path that led to the water's edge. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden light over the lake. The air was fresh, crisp with the promise of a new day. As they reached the shore, John sat down on a nearby bench, feeling the weight of everything he had been through. The struggles, the pain, the healing, but also the immense gratitude for the life he now had. Shadow sat beside him, her head resting on his lap as they watched the sunlight dance on the surface of the water. It was a perfect moment, the kind John had longed for. He realized that, although the past would always be a part of him, it no longer defined him. He had a new life now, and Shadow had given him that. As they sat in silence, John felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He had learned that healing wasn't just about surviving. It was about living fully, appreciating the quiet moments, and finding joy in the simplest of things. Shadow had taught him that. She had shown him the power of unconditional love, of loyalty that didn't ask for anything in return, and the strength of a bond that could never be broken. As the hours passed and the sun climbed higher in the sky, John felt a new sense of purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that with Shadow by his side, he could handle whatever came his way. They had already faced so much together, and they had always come out stronger. Now, it was time for a new chapter, one where they would continue to explore the world, find new adventures, and cherish every moment they had together. With a final glance at the lake, John stood up, ready to take the next step forward. Shadow trotted alongside him, her tail wagging, as they made their way back down the path, toward the future they would build together. As the seasons continued to change, so did the bond between John and Shadow. Each day felt like a new chapter in their story, one that was filled with purpose and meaning. John had always been someone who relied on action, someone who lived life at full speed. But since Shadow had entered his life, he had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the moments that allowed him to reflect on how far he had come. He no longer rushed through life, always looking for the next mission or the next goal. Instead, he found peace in the present, in the simple things, the sound of Shadow's pause as she ran beside him, the way she would look up at him with unwavering loyalty, and the comfort of her presence when the world felt overwhelming. Shadow had become more than just a dog. She was his partner, his confidant, his constant companion. The pain from the past still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. With Shadow by his side, John had learned how to move forward, how to heal not just physically, but emotionally as well. They had been through so much together, from the darkest days in the hospital to the quiet, peaceful moments they shared now. One afternoon, as they took a walk through the park, John couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had now. The world around him was calm and peaceful, and with Shadow by his side, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. He looked down at Shadow, who trotted along happily beside him, her tail wagging with every step. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. John realized how much he had changed, how much he had grown, and how much Shadow had played a part in that transformation. She had given him the strength to keep going when he thought he couldn't, and she had taught him the true meaning of loyalty, love, and companionship. As they sat on a bench near the edge of the park, John thought about the future. He wasn't sure what it would hold, but he knew that, with Shadow by his side, he could face anything. The future no longer seemed uncertain or scary. It was filled with possibilities, and with each passing day, he was learning to embrace them. Whether it was taking long walks in the park, volunteering with other veterans, or simply enjoying the quiet moments at home, John knew that he was living a life that was full and meaningful. Shadow had helped him find that, and for that, he would always be grateful. They were a team, and together, they had overcome so much. Whatever came next, they would face it together, side by side.